I cakap aku boleh. And for being with me from everything. The money organization that was there all the time. The fear is the same. Very good to me and my family. Pepatah Melayu mengatakan kawan ketawa mudah dicari, kawan menangis sukar dicari. Belum sampai ke tahap nangis lagi. Tapi begitulah lubang kehidupan. Bila kita senang, ramai kawan-kawan, kita menghadapi kesukaran, kita ramai yang sedia bersama dengan kita sebab suka. Jadi itu pada Shahredzan,
kita hasil lagi.
Okay, hopefully I tak kena setat. Okay, actually I'm here tonight. Mesti ada jemputan dan nak terangkan situasi sebenar, macam-macam laporan yang keluar dari sana. Sebenarnya saya dijatuhkan hukuman. Although I made a report on the ink, I was not charged on making report. So the good thing is next time for security personnel, you are free to make report, police report next time. So no problem about that. I was charged for speaking to the media. And then after the forum, I made the report, they transferred me to 2 hours. Because I showed the transfer letter to the media, I was charged on that. Just tell the security personnel for next edition, do make a police report, right? But don't speak to the media. Put a sellotape in your mouth or whatever. And the media, please don't ask. Get a copy of the police report and you can take a picture of the person. That's it. Basically, not many people know their rights. Most based on peer internet. In fact, many people ask about the support from my friends, colleagues in the military. I told them, ada kawan yang datang tell me that ada yang kena panggil sebab like my Facebook page. Planted this thanking because of like my Facebook page. So kalau tak tahu masuk my Facebook page tu, dia mungkin terkejut lah. Ini betul tak sekarang tulis ni? Tapi I speak frankly, yang tak betul lah. Betul kita sokong lah. Macam mostly tak betul kan? Okay, back to my situation now. Saya jatuhkan hukuman di wang kerja daripada perkhidmatan Sri pada Pukul Baginda. Maksudnya dalam military law ni dia ada dia punya sentence tu regarding my section lah. Section section 50 yang I kena tu hukuman maksimum penjara 2 tahun atau apa-apa hukuman yang lebih ringan daripada ini. Dan hukuman yang paling bawah pada penjara ialah yang pertama, buang kerja dengan keji daripada perkhidmatan. Second is buang kerja daripada perkhidmatan. Dan hukuman lebih ringan ni macam turun seniority, kena denda, itulah. Dan saya kena buang kerja daripada perkhidmatan. The word keji or dishonorable was not there. So, be clear on that. So, kalau ikut tafsirannya di buang kerja tu, maksudnya saya masih layak untuk mendapat faedah-faedah sebagai seorang usahawan, pensil, gratuiti dan sebagainya. Itu kita atas kertas lah. Tapi selagi benda tu dia tak masuk account, kita tak tahu kan. Harap-harap ada lah kan. Harap balik pensil dan sebagainya kan. Kawan yang buang pensil kan. So right now I'm studying. Before this, as a pilot, the armed forces, I mean, around net, around 10,000 to 12,000. But most of them are allowances. basic pay around 6,000 something. So if I get pension tu around 3,000. Tu lah, bayar hutang tu dah cukup. So of course my future plan, I try I can get the license from the civil, work with ada do air ke mas air lah. Okay, you nak kan air nombor aja lah. Okay, I can go to the civil sector, but for me I prefer not to work with people lah, and to be independent. Maybe venture into business, because the main thing I want to do is to contribute to society in terms of political process lah, contribute politically. Jadi calon ke apa? Bukan kita sendiri. Calon yang tu pun beda. Apa tu the political party sah. Saya macam poster je, apa poster je lagi. But I will do my best, give my best to the cause of the rakyat, perjuangan rakyat untuk mendapatkan apa yang bersih perjuangkan, satu pilihan raya yang adil dan bersih, dan sudah tentulah matlamat kita untuk mendapatkan sebuah kerajaan yang adil dan bersih, dan yang tidak rasuah, tidak menerik, tidak memihak rakyat dan sebagainya. Itulah matlamat kita, sebab kita hidup dalam bermasyarakat ini, kita nak dapatkan utamanya keselamatan, dapatkan merasa sedikit daripada hasil mahsul bumi ini, dapat hidup dengan aman, bahagia tanpa ada sebarang ancaman ataupun ketidakadilan. So most people dia selagi tak kena pada hidup dia tak risau. Kita tak perlu tunggu sampai tahap kena bertahan hidup kita, tapi sebagai manusia yang bertanggungjawab, kita dikehendaki untuk saling tolong menolong. Kalau dalam Islam ni konsepnya adalah amal ma'ruf nahi mungkar, menyeru kepada kebaikan dan mencegah kemungkaran. Mencegah tu Islam mengatakan, hadis Nabi mengatakan, kalau ada kuasa dengan kuasa, dengan tangan. Kalau tak mampu dengan tangan, dengan lidah, kan? Kalau tak mampu dengan lidah, dengan hati. Itulah sebenarnya iman. Dan saya berpegang yang itu, dan saya akan beri yang terbaiklah. Kalau perlu dengan tangan, dengan tangan. Tapi still within the law. Dengan lidah, lidah lah. Lidah pun within the law. But law, whoever interpret itu, itu law kan. So what I can tell is I will give my best to the cause of the rakyat, perjuangan rakyat. Apa yang diperlukan saya akan cuba beri, dan terima kasih banyak kepada semua pihak yang membantu saya, memberi moral support daripada segenap lapisan masyarakat. Selepas saya didapati salah ni, bercurah-curah siapa datang, tak nak jawab call, nak jawab SMS, sorry lah sampai tak sempat nak jawab tu, respon tu memang pack and jam. Biasa. Jadi sekali lagi saya mengucapkan terima kasih banyak juga kepada semua pihak, terutama bersih yang banyak membantu saya dan keluarga menghadapi saat-saat yang sukar. Dan kalau tuan-tuan ada apa-apa soalan, saya boleh talk dulu. Ada apa-apa? Tak ada, kan? Sekian saja, terima kasih. Sekali lagi terima kasih banyak.
Next, Shah, you come up. Shah will be our moderator for the evening.
Testing. Terima kasih Puan Pengerusi Majlis. Assalamualaikum dan selamat sejahtera semua. Sebelum kita mulakan forum, boleh saya jemput semua tiga-tiga panelis kita untuk naik ke atas bersama saja. Para hadirin sekalian, sebelum memulakan forum, saya ingin memetik sedikit kata-kata ahli majlis terkenal Albus Dumbledore dalam buku Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Dark times lie ahead of us. Soon, all of us must choose between doing what is right and what is easy. This choice presented itself to Mejar Zaidi, and to his eternal credit, he chose what was right instead of what was easy. Dan pilihan yang dibuat oleh Mejar Zaidi ini telah mengakibatkan dirinya dipecat daripada angkatan tersebut. Nah, oleh sebab itu, para hadirin sekalian, forum kita pada malam ini bertajuk Parah kerana benar, Bebas kerana salah. Topik yang saya fikir cukup hangat, dan untuk mengupas topik yang hangat ini, kita ada 3 orang panelis yang cukup hebat. Dan panelis pertama saya ingin jemput adalah Dr. Aziz Bari. Dr. Aziz Bari adalah seorang pakar perlembagaan tanah air yang cukup terkenal, dan saya rasa kalau ada orang yang dalam dewan ni yang tak kenal Dr. Aziz Bari, mungkin dia baru lahir atau sebelum ni dia berada di luar negara. Jadi saya rasa tak perlulah kita saya beri introduction yang panjang lebar tentang Dr. Aziz Bari. Pendapatnya tentang berbagai isu undang-undang dan perbankan selalu disiarkan dalam media, dan beliau juga selalu melibatkan diri dalam forum-forum seperti ini. Jadi tanpa membuang masa lagi, saya ingin menjemput Dr. Aziz Bari untuk memberi perkongsian tentang topik kita bersama.
Assalamualaikum dan salam. Tapi saya ingin ucapkan tahniah dan syabas kepada rakan kita Mejar Zaidi, Mejar Zaidi yang melakon ataupun yang begitu cekal dan berani mempertahankan prinsipnya, dan saya fikir ini satu perkara yang cukup memberansangkan, kerana perkhidmatan awam, anggota perkhidmatan awam, termasuk kalangan militeri dan juga pihak polis, sukar untuk memberikan ataupun memberikan komitmen kepada perjuangan rakyat. Tetapi kita dapat dalam pribadi ataupun sosok Mejar Zaidi ini kita lihat suatu karakter yang berbeza. Dan saya teringat revolusi Iran tahun 1979 ya. Kalau kita imbas kembali, kalau tak silap saya, Air Force lah yang pertama sekali menyertai perjuangan rakyat untuk mengembangkan syairan waktu itu. Dan saya doakan dan kita semua memberikan sokongan kepada Mejar Zaidi supaya dapat meneruskan perjalanan beliau, dan tadi telah pun beliau katakan beliau sanggup untuk terus memberikan sumbangan termasuk dari calon syabas ya. Pertama saya nak sebut soal court martial ataupun mahkamah tentera. Secara ringkas ataupun secara umum, sebenarnya mahkamah tentera ini sebenarnya mahkamah yang bersifat tribunal perkhidmatan, ya, bukan sesuatu yang mengatas perlembagaan ataupun luar biasa. Nama saja hebat mahkamah tentera. Jadi dia tertakluk kepada perlembagaan, tertakluk kepada undang-undang biasa. Cuma kelebihan kalau kita, if you are talking from the point of view of the service, yeah, it's easier to take action from this using this procedure, because unlike the court, they are not bound by procedures, by law and so on. Even though sekarang kalau kita tengok mahkamah sudah berpolitik kan, jadi sebenarnya susah nak bezakan di antara tribunal perkhidmatan dengan court proper. Tak ada bezanya. Cuma kalau dalam konteks mahkamah tentera ataupun tribunal perkhidmatan awam, lembaga disiplin terutamanya, mereka boleh mengambil perkara yang politikal, ya. Jadi kalau kita tengok tadi, perkara yang sebenar, yakni report polis tak dijadikan tuduhan, tetapi bercakap kepada media yang dijadikan sebagai satu alasan untuk membuang Mejar Zaidi daripada perkhidmatan. Dan sudah pastinya beliau menanggung kesan dan risiko yang cukup besar. Jadi bukan perkara yang kecil, dan saya sendiri ada sedikit mengalami seperti itu, kena buang kerja, tak ada gaji, dihina dan sebagainya. Sebab ada orang di kalangan keluarga kita juga yang terasa, ya, yang susah bila dah tak ada kerja dan sebagainya. Jadi sebab itu sokongan tuan-tuan dan perempuan untuk Mejar Zaidi sangat besar. Jadi itu kedudukan tribunal yang bersifat ataupun dalam bentuk court martial itu. Cuma apa yang saya melihat begitu menarik di situ ialah bahawa beliau disebut oleh Presiden Mahkamah Tentera sebagai orang yang engkar perintah atasan, ya, antara perkara yang disebutkan itu. Pada saya perkara yang signifikan, yang menarik, kerana beliau dituduh dihadapkan ke Mahkamah Tentera dalam keadaan aman, bukan dalam keadaan perang, ya. Kalau tuan-tuan biasa dengan Nuremberg trial, ya, yang membicarakan beberapa orang pemimpin kanan ataupun jenderal Nazi sewaktu Perang Dunia Kedua, isu perintah atasan ini tidak menjadi isu, menjadi perkara penting. So the command of the superior was one of the issue that still, a major issue among law student. Kalau sesudah kami undang belajar dari student, jadi isu itu jadi isu yang kita pening kepala, ya. Mana satu nak ikut, justice, humanity ataupun superior order, mana yang penting, yang lebih besar. Jadi dalam soal ini saya tidak nampak logik bagaimana Mejar Zaidi boleh dibuang hanya kerana kononnya engkar perintah pegawai atasan ataupun perintah daripada panglima ataupun kerajaan. Oleh kerana kita ada perlembagaan, dan apa yang dilakukan oleh Mejar Zaidi adalah sesuatu yang sah di sisi perlembagaan, ya. Beliau hanya menjalankan tugas ataupun melaksanakan tugas tanggungjawab hak sebagai seorang rakyat. He was just exercising or perhaps carrying out the duty of a responsible citizen. Lodging a police report, yeah. Because we are dealing with a situation whereby a public authority, the election commission, failed to do its job, ya. Satu otoriti awam gagal menjalankan tugas statutorinya, ya. Jadi di mana salah Mejar Zaidi di situ? Dan kalau ada pun, ya, kita tidak tahu betul ada satu order daripada pihak atasan, dia punya CEO ke, dia punya general ke, dia punya apa ke, ataupun dia panglima dia ke. Perintah ini kalau kita tengok dalam keadaan yang tidak perang, ya, in a peace situation, saya sebut tadi soal Nuremberg trial, dan keadaan perang tu, itu pun masih dipersoalkan sampai sekarang. Jadi kalau dalam konteks Mejar Zaidi yang hanya sekadar menjalankan tugas sebagai seorang rakyat, melaksanakan hak sebagai seorang pengundi, ya, yang tidak disebut sebagai larangan ataupun sebagai kesalahan di mana-mana undang. Jadi mereka kena buktikan bahawa apa yang dilakukan oleh Mejar Zaidi itu salah di undang. Jadi kalau dikatakan bertentangan ataupun menentang perintah ke atasan, kita harus ingat perintah yang sah atau tidak. dan dalam konteks keadaan aman, tidak perang, saya tidak fikir superior order ini satu perkara yang crucial, yang penting, yang boleh mengatasi perlembagaan, mengatasi undang-undang. Ya. Jadi ini satu perkara yang saya fikir harus kita bincangkan, oleh kerana media akan mainkan isu ini. Sebab Mejar Zaidi ini engkar, Mejar Zaidi ini sebagai seorang anggota tentera tidak mematuhi yang tuan tu sebagai panglima tentera, bukan, tapi macam begitu. Ya. Jadi ini yang dimainkan dan dilupa ataupun sengaja tidak disebut bahawa di situ ataupun isu sebenar ialah soal beliau hanya menjalankan tugas sebagai seorang rakyat, ya, melaksanakan hak sebagai seorang rakyat, sebagai pengundi untuk mengemukakan membuat report bahawa SDR gagal, ya, memenuhi janji mereka bahawa dakwaan kekal itu benar-benar kekal. Semua orang tahu, Najib tahu, Kursi tahu, kita pun, semua orang tahu dah. Banyak pun masuk. Jadi sebenarnya SDR di situ kita boleh katakan menipu. Jadi di mana salah seorang pegawai atau seorang rakyat seperti Mejar Zaidi yang hanya membuat report tentang kegagalan, kesilapan ataupun penipuan yang dilakukan oleh sebuah agensi awam. Jadi ini isunya. Kita jangan nanti tertipu dengan RTM, dengan utusan, dengan TV3 dan segala macam mengatakan ini apa, pegawai tentera ini engkar perintah ini tidak setia bernegara dan segala macam. Jadi isu ini, ya, dan kalau dalam konteks pegawai tentera sebagai seorang anggota keselamatan, ya, itu ribut trial tadi, saya ingat benchmarknya. Kalau dalam keadaan perang seperti itu pun, ya, superior order itu boleh dipersoalkan dalam konteks keadilan, dalam konteks kezaliman, konteks kebenaran. Mengapa dalam konteks tidak berperang? Peaceful situation. Ini bukan dalam keadaan perang. Kalau katakan beliau dalam keadaan dia dihantar sebagai misi pengaman di PBB, itu lain cerita lah, bukan? Kalau CEO dia suruh tembak, dia tak tembak, itu lain cerita. Dalam keadaan seperti itu, ini bukan soal itu. Ini soal yang jelas, dan beliau sebagai seorang rakyat, ya, walaupun seorang tentera, tetapi beliau juga adalah seorang rakyat, pembayar cukai, taxpayer, berhak untuk mengemukakan police report. Ya, gitu. Jadi soal lain sebagai bercakap kepada media, soal yang remeh-temeh, yang kecil, berbanding dengan soal yang besar itu. Ya, jadi pada saya inilah isu yang kita kena fikirkan, dan saya fikir kita jangan tertipu dengan segala red herring yang akan dibangkitkan oleh media dan sebagainya. Itu yang saya jangka akan dimainkan oleh mereka untuk mengelirukan kita daripada isu sebenar dalam kes Mejar Zaidi. Sekian, terima kasih.
Saya sebenarnya cukup suka lah dengar setiap kali kalau Dr. Aziz Bari bagi ucapan atau pembentangan. Saya memang cukup suka sebab setiap kali saya dengar, saya rasa macam ilmu saya bertambah. Dan saya dulu masa belajar law, saya tak buat perlembagaan Malaysia, tapi kalau saya ada buat, saya harap pada masa tu mungkin tak ada lecturer yang lebih baik yang boleh ajar perlembagaan Malaysia daripada kalau kita nak bandingkan dengan Aziz Bari. Panelis kedua kita pada malam ni adalah saudara Steven Thiru, timbalan yang dipertua Bar Malaysia. Apa tu? Atau lebih dikenali sebagai Vice President of the Malaysian Bar. Saya tak ramai tahu. Tak ramai tahu sebenarnya kalau kita tengok akta profession Guaman sebenarnya Vice President of the Malaysian Bar adalah timbalan yang dipertua. Dan saudara Steven Thiru adalah seorang peguam tersohor. Banyak juga, dia memang dah lama terlibat dalam aktiviti Bar Malaysia. Sebelum menjadi timbalan yang dipertua, beliau adalah bendahari treasurer Bar Malaysia. Dan boleh dikira saudara Steven ini macam bos saya juga lah dalam diskurs. Memang bos, dia baru betulkan saya, memang bos saya. Jadi tanpa melengahkan masa, sebelum bos marah, saudara Steven Thiru.
Terima kasih, Syah.
way in which the military court functions. Walaupun Saudara Aziz Bari tadi mengatakan bahawa mahkamah tentera itu bukannya sebuah mahkamah, tapi ia sebenarnya berfungsi sebagai mahkamah. Ia bukannya satu tribunal yang boleh membuat undang-undang sesuka hati. It cannot act as it wishes. It is governed by the Armed Forces Act, and it must act within the provisions of the Armed Forces Act. It has to be constituted, for example, under the Armed Forces Act. And there are five, in Mejar Zaidi's case, we had a tribunal of 5. Dan itu adalah penting kerana kalau dilihat tribunal ini kerana berfungsi sebagai mahkamah, mereka mempunyai tanggungjawab yang berat. Dan tanggungjawab itu adalah untuk is to dispense justice in accordance to law. What does that mean? That means that the tribunal just does not function within the 4 corners of the statute. It must. But there are also many implied rules that apply to the tribunal like any other court of law. You'd be surprised to know that the tribunal, the military court, can imprison a service personnel. It can actually sentence a service personnel to death. It can dismiss a service personnel honorably or dishonorably. So it has very wide powers. Its powers affect the rights, the livelihood, the life of a service personnel. So it's not just about what is within the statute, whether it's constituted according to the statute, whether it acts in accordance to the statute. There is one very important principle that governs all tribunals, all courts of law. Kita kira tribunal atau mahkamah. And that's the rule of natural justice. You cannot say, tidak boleh mengatakan, mana ada dalam akta ini mengatakan bahawa mahkamah tentera harus berfungsi mengikut principles natural justice. Mana mengatakan? It's not here. There's no provision that says you must accord natural justice. But that's the magic of the law. The magic of the law is if you choose to function as an adjudicatory body, that means you decide on the rights of persons, then the rules of natural justice are implied, they apply. And by far, the rules of natural justice are perhaps the most important rules that govern a tribunal court of law. Why? First, we live in a democratic society, we believe in human rights. There must be a right for both parties to be heard. No tribunal, no court can decide by just listening to one party and say, I don't listen to you. It doesn't work that way. Second, most importantly, the tribunal must be neutral, independent, and the magic word, it must not be biased. Now that's very important, because when one talks about bias, apa itu bias? What's the definition of bias? See, it's not as elegant as bias. Sting is not there, you know. Bias is a sting. There are two types of bias. First, there is what is really actual bias. That means the decision maker, the judge, has some sort of a financial interest in the decision, a direct interest. Okay, that's the most extreme. Seldom happens, I would say, but it does happen. The other bias is actually not so serious in that sense, because you don't need to show a financial interest. It is sufficient if there is a suspicion or real danger of bias, because of maybe you have a particular view, maybe you said something about the case, you express your thoughts, which shows that you cannot be neutral in deciding the case. Tidak boleh, you can't decide with justice. That's basically it. Now that is a very important aspect of the rules of natural justice, is where a judge says, for example, and there are cases where a judge says, I have a particular view on this matter, and then he sits in the case. He's not going to be able to decide the case in a neutral manner, because he already has a predisposed view of the case. he ought to disqualify himself. Before even somebody ask him to do that, if somebody comes and says, you are deciding this case, alright, but you have very strong views about this position, you think you can be fair, he should disqualify himself. It doesn't matter whether I think I'm fair, but because I have these views, there must be an appearance of justice. Justice not only must be done, cliche, not only must be done, must be seen to be done. So I will step aside. There are cases where a judge decides. The case then goes on appeal. And after he decides, he passes certain remarks about how unhappy he is about the law. It's an actual case. On appeal, it's picked up. It says that shows you always had a predisposition, you always had a predetermination of how this case should have been decided. You shouldn't have. So although I said the rule against bias, the first one, the actual bias is the most extreme, financial bias, you can see how important this is. This is a very high test. So if you have a judge at any point of the trial expressing his view about how the case should go, then he or she should step aside. Certainly, if he or she is faced with an objection, and this is no distinction between a military tribunal and a court of law. If one of the parties stands up and says, you have said something, we know about this, it is in the public sphere now, we think you should step aside. There's really no argument unless it can be shown he didn't say it. If he carries on, for whatever reason, and in a military tribunal what happens is, when faced with an objection like that, it's supposed to check with the convening authority. Actually, there's no check required, if you ask me. It's not the convening authority that decides. It's the tribunal that has to decide, there and then. And it doesn't matter if the convening authority says, I've heard you, I accept your explanation, you are not biased. What you say, slip of the tongue, tidak apa, tolong jalan. It doesn't work that way. The rule against bias is so stringent, so strict, that that person must be removed from the panel. If he has spoken to other members of the panel, the entire panel is infected. The entire panel must be dissolved. It cannot sit. That's how high the threshold, how high the test is. And there are no exceptions, ladies and gentlemen. Tidak ada exception kepada ini. Rule against bias. When it comes out in that way, there is no exception. You cannot say now, I repent. Saya tukar fikiran sekarang. Dulu saya kata, tapi sekarang saya nak tukar fikiran. Jadi saya boleh teruskan. No. It's spoiled. It's messed up. You have to step aside. Certainly, what happens then is the situation in a military tribunal, because it's so important, a breach of the rules of natural justice will render the decision of the tribunal invalid, unlawful. A challenge can be mounted. You take it to the High Court. We call it judicial review, which basically says the High Court should intervene and stop. If the tribunal knows there's a High Court proceedings afoot, that means the party who's unhappy because the judge does not want, or the chairperson does not want to step aside, then the tribunal should not proceed. It cannot proceed because the matter is in another court deciding a very critical matter. It should not proceed. If you ask me, it's actually in the interest of the tribunal not to proceed, because if the High Court decides there is no bias, it cleans the whole slate. It's cleansed. The proceedings are not impaired, not compromised. It can go on. It is in the interest of the tribunal at that stage to actually hold its hand, irrespective of whether the High Court got a stay. You know there is proceedings afoot. The lawyers here will tell you, if a party knows there's a proceedings afoot, and then if it proceeds with a matter, that can even be contempt, because you're destroying the subject matter in another court, rendering it academic. Tidak ada guna lagi. That's how serious this is in a situation where there is an appearance of bias. Now, I wanted to speak about that, and I'll certainly explain more if it's necessary, because it's a bit technical, but I think you understand that our standards, courts, tribunals is very high. so long as there is a suspicion that the decision maker is not neutral for one reason or another, he or she must not sit in the tribunal. It's as clear as that. No exceptions. Now, let's not also forget what is at stake in this case. What happened? The military tribunal can dismiss. What's a dismissal? Buang kerja, apa maksud dia? It's a livelihood issue. Now in Malaysia, employment, the right to be employed, right to work, is just not a contractual right. You know, you have a contract of employment, the contract employment. Our courts have elevated that right to a constitutional right. Right to life, Article 5. And what does that mean? It means you cannot deprive a person of his livelihood safe in accordance with the law. And law here means procedural fairness, which is natural justice. So if you're going to sack somebody, for example, even in the private sphere, you must give the person the right to be heard. Even in the public sphere, right to be heard. You cannot get rid of somebody in breach of natural justice. If you get rid of somebody in breach of natural justice, you've not only breached his private right, public right, you've actually breached his constitutional rights. And that's what happens in a situation like this. Because you are dealing with the constitutional right. And if there is an appearance of bias being part of natural justice, then you have actually, the constitutional right has been breached on grounds of natural justice. And you've deprived the person of his livelihood. That's how serious this is. This is not a simple case of a person losing his job. This is a person who has been deprived of his constitutional right, not in accordance to law. That's critical. Not in accordance to law, because he's been deprived of natural justice. That's all I wanted to really say. To give you that aspect of it, particularly, I think we've heard a lot of bias. We've heard about that, but I thought I should also place this before you. Right to life. That's actually what is at stake here. And when a case like this goes to the next level, the courts will take that into account, because we have many cases. As I said that, I just recall there's something else I want to say. Now, yes, a tribunal has the right under the Act to dismiss. But there's another rule that is also implied. The dismissal or the punishment imposed by the tribunal must be commensurate, the legal word is proportionate, with the offence. So if it is here just a case of not having followed orders or insubordination, the question must also be asked whether or not the right punishment was a dismissal, or was a dismissal too harsh, disproportionate. A disproportionate punishment is also a breach of natural justice. So that's the other aspect which I think has not really come up. Apart from livelihood, that the punishment itself, harsh, disproportionate, and in that sense, unconstitutional. Thank you.
Pos pembentang yang cukup baik buat wadah. Terima kasih saudara Thiru. Panelis terakhir kita, tuan-tuan dan puan, tak asing lagi adalah Puan Maria Chin Abdullah, pengurusi bersih 2.0. Siapa tak kenal Puan Maria Chin? Kalau kita cakap tentang bersih, terus kita dalam kepala kita ingat tentang Puan Maria Chin dan juga selendang kuningnya. Dan untuk memberi perspektif kenal isu ini dari aspek masyarakat Madani, saya jemput Puan Maria Chin Abdullah.
Terima kasih. I think that I would like to really thank every one of you for actually taking your time to come. And it really means a lot, particularly to Mejar Zaidi. I just want to emphasize a little bit more about what he has actually gone through, because if you actually sit through all the court hearings that he has actually gone through, you will actually understand that it is not just because he stood for the truth. He actually was brave enough, together with his family, brave enough to actually, even at the stress of the family, he actually took a stand. At any point in the hearing, he could have said, okay, that's it, I can give up. But he never. He was asked a few times, but he actually stood his ground and said that he had not done anything wrong. And for that, I think it is really sad that we actually lost a good hero in the army. And I think that, what we are actually facing is really, Mejar Zaidi's case is only one part of what is happening to our society in Malaysia. If you notice all the issues that have been coming up, the society is actually moving into more of a culture of where the government, where the state has actually failed us, where it is actually inculcating a system which promotes a culture of fear, a culture of silence, and to actually suppress the expression. And this is something that Mejar Zaidi himself actually tries to break through and to say, no, I will not keep quiet, despite of all the risk and the stress that he is going through. He actually stood and said that he will speak the truth. And that is what we need in Malaysia. And if you look at the way in which his case was actually being handled, it is actually saying that, there is impunity for perpetrators. Because the main perpetrator is actually the election commission. They actually introduced the indelible ink that never worked. And they knew that it never worked. And they had cheated 13 million voters by using that indelible ink. It's not even indelible. And EC has not actually been taken to task for cheating the voters. But someone like Mejar Zaidi, who spoke the truth to say that the ink is actually washable, has to now face the penalty. And this is the kind of system that we have. Impunity for the perpetrators. I was actually able to do an observation in Sri Lanka under the Commonwealth, and they also used the indelible ink. And the indelible ink was actually not our it's not in a liquid form, it was in a pen. And that lasted for at least 3 days. If Sri Lanka, and given the political condition in Sri Lanka, they can actually use an indelible ink that can actually work, why can't Malaysia? And that is the thing that we have to really say to the EC, that they have to take responsibility. They have to actually particularly the leadership in EC has to be removed, because they actually cause a lot of issue with the indelible ink. And the other thing is that the third point that I really want to bring out is what the lawyers have actually brought forward, is the manner in which the court has been run. Because at one point, Bari actually made a police report against the presiding officer, who actually posted his opinion when the court case was actually going through. He posted an opinion of how he felt about Mejar Zaidi and why he should not be a soldier, but better to go and tap rubber. And that was what he posted in the article. When it was brought up in the court, in this army court, it was not even considered as a bias in the panel of judges. In fact, the person who actually delivered that decision to say that, the presiding officer is not guilty is actually the presiding officer himself. And that is how the court actually runs the whole proceeding. It is really a kangaroo court, to be honest. That there is a lot of biasness, inconsistency. They started with 7 charges, it got reduced to 5, and then it got reduced further to another 3. And there were no reasons given as to why the charges were so flexible. And I feel that, this is really where we have to actually also start mobilizing and speaking about what Mejar Zaidi is going through. Personally, ourselves, we hope that we will actually do some roadshow to actually talk about Mejar Zaidi's case, provided that, it's within that legal framework and not get him into more trouble. But we are hoping that we will actually go from state to state. In fact, Penang has already started, and they are going to have one similar event like this organized by Bari and Suara. And I hope that what all of you can really help Mejar Zaidi is to go back and talk to another 10 persons about the injustice that he has actually faced, and to actually pass this message on that we do need heroes like Mejar Zaidi. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih, Puan Maria Chen. When Mejar Zaidi was giving his speech, I think he actually complained a lot of what has happened to him, and I think that's really to his credit. He's been very humble. He doesn't portray himself as a hero, but we all know that what he did, and I think what Puan Maria's speech tonight, actually I think really is a tiny reminder to us, actually, as to what is at stake, and also the larger context of the struggle before. Agenda seterusnya berada sekalian pada malam ini adalah sesi soal jawab. Kita ada lebih kurang 30 minit. Jika anda ingin mengutarakan soalan kepada para panelis kita, kita ada mikrofon di tengah-tengah. Sila perkenalkan diri dan ajukan soalan anda. Tolong jangan, kalau boleh tolong jangan bagi statement dan cuba berceramah tapi kononnya nak bertanya soalan. Sebab rakyat Malaysia memang suka buat macam tu. Jadi tolong ajukan soalan, sebab saya rasa ramai yang nak bertanyakan soalan, jadi kita tak ada banyak masa. Silakan. Mungkin saya boleh tanya lah. To get the ball rolling. Ada.
I just have one question for Mr. Stephen. Will it influence? Tak dengar. Will it influence the outcome of what was passed in the military court? If Mejar Zaidi had lodged a police report wearing his uniform, would that be taken into concern? Because he said that he made the police report as a concerned citizen, as a voter. But if he made a police report wearing his military attire, would that actually affect somehow the proceedings in the military court? Would that be taken into concern? Because he was said to be violating military rules. So would this actually affect? It's just curiosity.
I don't think the uniform matters, it's his status.
Because there were some concerns raised by some of our leaders that perhaps this was also one of the points that the court would have deliberated upon. But in your opinion, what do you think about it?
In my opinion, I think it's his status. He's still a service personnel. I think that's how the military court has jurisdiction over him, as opposed to a civilian person. It's not the clothes he wore. Yeah, so I don't think it's service.
So that is not supposed to be one of the points.
Not a major issue with it. It's not a major issue because as far as, I mean, the law is concerned, he is a serviceman. He is an officer of the Royal British Air Force, a pilot, and still served in the force. But of course, the military authority can take the option of not taking any action, and this is the problem. So, I mean, it is up to the authorities in the Air Force just to keep quiet, because, as I said earlier, I mean, we are here talking about the Constitution. So, orders or whatever have got to be seen within that context, you see. So, I mean, that's the question of choice. So, of course, no one can question, because if you go back to the Constitution, not even the AG can interfere with the decision to take action, I mean, on the part of the military court, because it's outside the jurisdiction of the Attorney General, you know. So, but I mean, this is a question of, I mean, the conscience, question of moral on the part of the Air Force authorities, not so much about the uniform.
Yeah, I just add to that, I just looked it up, because every provision under the part where he was charged starts with every person subject to service law. So you must be a service personnel, alright? So it doesn't mean service personnel who's not wearing uniform, alright? So long as you're service personnel, you're subject to service law, the section applies. Yeah.
If I may. Now, even the problem now that they've got is even those who have retired from the service. Remember during the last 2 years, you have got several generals, admirals, and some Air Force top brass who have retired, joined the opposition, and you just, you see in the media, I mean, it raises concern, and suddenly, there is all sort of etiquettes, whatever, I mean, that question the statement, and I think to some extent, even there were rumors that action will be taken against some of these retired generals for so-called, breaching this and that, or releasing secret. But the point is that, I mean, it's very critical service. So we can understand why, they come down hard on Mejar Zaidi, because if that was the way they reacted to retired service person, then you can imagine, why they, decided to come down hard on Mejar Zaidi.
Just to clarify, the charges that he faced was actually nothing to really related with the uniform, but that he actually talked to the media. He did an SMS, he's here anyway, he can explain. And he was actually charged also because he did not raise this with his superior. Mejar Zaidi, maybe you can also explain the charges that you, So it is really nothing to do with the uniform.
Tentang pertuduhan ada 7 pertuduhan. Dua yang dekat selepas terima PSC habis lah, dan dua tu didapati kesalahan seperti yang dijanjikan. Iaitu pertamanya membuat sidang media